I buried my daughter 25 years ago under a maple tree that turns the color of fire every October. And for 25 years, I thought that was the one thing in my life I could not possibly be wrong about. Her name was Lillian Carter, born June 9th, 1980, gone October 14th, 1999. And those dates are carved into stone so deep I could trace them with my eyes closed. I'm an old woman now, pushing 78, with bad knees, a stubborn heart, and a mind that still remembers the sound of the dirt hitting her casket. I've outlived my husband, my parents, my friends from church, and just about everyone who used to know me before my hair went white. But I never outlived my grief. You don't move on from losing a child. You just learn how to walk around that hole without falling in every single day. So when my story starts at 2:19 in the morning with my phone ringing on the nightstand, you have to understand something first. For 2.5 decades, the name Lily has sat in my contacts like a ghost I pay a monthly bill for. I kept a number after the accident, even after the service got shut off. Even after my son told me, "Mom, you gotta let this go. This is not healthy." I paid the stupid $10 a month just to see her name in that little list. I never dialed it after the line got cut. I tried enough times in those first few months and memorized the recording. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I knew it by heart the way I knew the hymn they played at her funeral. Still, I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Clicking that little trash icon felt like burying her twice. So yeah, every time I scrolled to call my sister, or my son, or my church friend Linda, I saw Lily, sitting there like a frozen piece of time, and I'd just keep scrolling. That's why, when my old Android lit up in the dark and vibrated itself halfway off the table, and I blinked at the screen and saw that exact name glowing back at me, for a solid 3 seconds I thought I was having a stroke. I was in that foggy place between sleep and waking, where your brain hasn't decided what's real yet, but I could read just fine. Incoming call, Lily. Same photos I snapped the day she turned 19, leaning on my kitchen counter with a chipped mug of coffee, hair in a messy ponytail, rolling her eyes at me for making her pose. The picture hadn't changed in 25 years, but the context sure had. She was supposed to be in the ground 2 miles from my house, not lighting up my phone like she'd just finished a late shift and wanted to chat. The ringtone kept playing some generic marimba thing my grandson set up for me while my heart tried to punch its way out of my chest. I'm an old lady, but that fear, that was pure teenage panic. I stared, frozen, thumb hovering over the green button. A part of me whispered, "This is some scam, Evelyn, some glitch. Don't be stupid." Another part of me, the part that still smelled hospital disinfectant in my dreams, said, "If you don't pick up and it really is her somehow, you will never forgive yourself." On the 5th ring, I hit accept. I put the phone to my ear, with a hand that shook so hard, it brushed my cheek. At first, there was nothing. No static, no beeps, not even that little background his phones usually have. Just dead air, and I thought, okay, there it is. You're officially losing it. And then I heard breathing. Slow, human, right up against the mic. In, out, in, out. My throat closed up. I tried to say hello, but it felt like my vocal cords were wrapped in barbed wire. Then a voice spoke, soft, confused, and it used a name nobody had called me in years. Mom, one word, and my whole world tipped sideways. It sounded like her. Older somehow, roughened at the edges like someone who'd smoked for a while or yelled too much, but it was her. I know my child's voice the way I know my own hands. "Mom, are you there?" she said again. A little louder, with that tiny hitch she used to get when she was trying not to cry. My mouth finally unlocked. "Lily." It came out like a squeak. I had done. Dee said her name out loud in that tone since she was a teenager, sneaking in past curfew. There was this long stretch of silence, long enough that I thought the call had dropped, and then she whispered, "Yeah, it's me. Where am I?" Now, I've heard a lot of strange things in my life. Confessions at church, drunken rambling at barbecues, my neighbor insisting her dog can understand full sentences, but hearing your dead daughter ask, "Where am I?" in the middle of the night? That's a whole different category of weird. My brain did this stupid thing where it tried to reach for logic while my heart was already jumping off a cliff. "What do you mean? Where are you?" I asked, and my voice sounded like it belonged to some other old woman. "Baby, what are you talking about?" Her breathing sped up, like she'd just started sprinting. "I don't know," she said. "Nothing looks right. I don't remember getting here. I was driving, and then everything went wrong." And then she cut herself off with a little gasp. When she spoke again, her voice was tight. "Mom, how long has it been?" That question hit harder than any punch. Not what happened. Not why does my head hurt. Not is everybody okay. She jumped right to time, like some part of her already knew something was way off. "How long has Wep been?" I asked, stalling, because there was no version of that answer I knew how to give. "Since the crash," she said, and the word crash came out like it was made of glass. My free hand grabbed the edge of the nightstand. I was suddenly wide awake, heart pounding like it was 29 again instead of 7. My mind flashed back to that October night. The cop at the door, the hat in his hands, the drive to the hospital where I kept saying, "She's okay, she's okay." Like a spell that never worked. "Lily," I said slowly, trying not to sound like a crazy person, "what's the last thing you remember?" On the other end, I heard her swallow. "I was clocking out from the diner," she said. "It was raining like hell. I got in my car, called Hannah, told her I'd be there in 20. I remember the light turning green at the intersection by the gas station. I remember headlights coming at me too fast. Then, her breath hitched. Then, I remember thinking, oh God, this is it. And it hurt, and then it didn't. And then everything went black. I squeezed my eyes shut. She was describing the accident the way the officer had explained it to me, but with more detail, like she'd watched it from inside her own skull. "Lily," I whispered, "that was a long time ago." "How long?" she demanded, and there was that stubborn streak I used to fight with over curfews and boyfriends and tattoos. "Don't do that thing where you baby me. Just tell me." I looked at the digital clock by my bed like it could help. 2:21 glowed back at me in cheap blue numbers. "It's been about 25 years, I said finally. I braced myself for laughter, for anger, for her to say, "Nice one, Mom." Instead, there was dead silence, and then a soft, broken, "No way, no way, that's Mom. I'm 19. The way she said it made my chest ache. 19 had been her favorite number. 19 and invincible. That's how she'd lived. "Not anymore," I said before I could stop myself. That came out harsher than I meant. "If this is really you talking to me on Didanti, understand how that would even be possible then something." I trailed off, because something felt way too small for what this was. "Mom," she said, and this time her voice was small, like when she was little and woke up from nightmares about monsters under the bed. I tried asking people what day it is. They just walk past me, like I'm not even there. I waved my hands in front of a guy's face, and he looked right through me. I thought I was losing it. Then I found this phone on the counter, and your number was in it. It was the only one I recognized, I don't know where I am. I don't know what this place is. Everything's wrong. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up too fast. The room spun, my old bones protesting. But I needed the light on, needed something normal. I flipped the lamp and squinted at the walls of my small apartment's same framed pictures of Lily. Same crocheted blanket on the couch, same dusty little plant my neighbor swore wasn't dead yet. My whole life was on those walls, and none of it made sense with the voice in my ear. Okay, I said, forcing my brain into mom mode instead of meltdown mode. Listen to me, honey. You said you're in some kind of building. Yeah, she said. It's dark. There's apartments, I think. Doors. Hallways. It smells old, like wet carpet and cigarettes. There's a busted vending machine, and a staircase that goes down. But every time I try to leave, it's like I end up back where I started. I know that sounds insane. You're talking to your 70-80-year-old mother from a disconnected number after 25 years, I said. We passed insane 5 minutes ago. Just keep describing it. That got the tiniest snort out of her, the ghost of her old laugh. You sound older, she said quietly. I mean, duh, but you sound tired. Yeah, well, life kept going on this end, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Now, is there anything around you that looks like an address? A door with a number? A mailbox? Something. I heard her footsteps echo. Then a door creaked. Hang on, she murmured. A second later, the line crackled like she'd shifted the phone. There's a number on the door. 8. Just an 8. And, oh, there's junk mail on the floor. More rustling, okay? I got an envelope. It says, Riverview Arms Apartments, 712 East Maple, Harrington, Ohio. Apartment 8. Mom, where the hell is Harrington? My hands went cold. Harrington, Ohio, was 3 hours away. I only knew that because my husband, God rest him, used to drive through there for work and complain about the speed traps. It's not close, I said slowly. Listen to me. If this is real, if there's even a chance, I can come there. I can get in my car and drive, but I need you to do something for me. Okay, she said. What? Stay put, I said. Don't go wandering off. Don't chase any weird lights or voices or whatever. Stay by that door, or in that apartment, or whatever room you're in. Keep talking to me if you can. I'll come find you. There was an awful pause. Mom, she whispered. Yeah. What if I'm not really there? The question hung between us. Like smoke. For a second, I had no answer. I thought of her grave, the stone I'd picked, the way the cemetery grass felt under my knees. Then I guess I am about to drive 3 hours to yell at an empty building, I said. But I'm still coming. That's my job. Her breath hitched again. Okay, she said. I'll try to stay here. It's just, everything feels wrong, like I'm wearing someone else's skin. That sentence made my heart crawl. I'm leaving as soon as the sun's up, I said. I can't see worth a damn at night. Call me again if anything changes. You hear? I will, she said. Mom? Yeah, baby, I'm scared. Those 2 words ripped me open. I'd heard them when she was 5 and afraid of thunderstorms, when she was 14 and had to get her first filling at the dentist, when she was 17 and didn't get into her first choice college. Each time, I'd had some kind of answer ready. Now, I had nothing. Me too, I said, and my voice cracked. But you called the right person. I was about to say more when the line went dead. No click, no fade out, just gone. The call timer on my screen froze at 7:56, then minimized itself like nothing weird had just happened. I stared at the phone a second, then jabbed call back with my thumb. It rang once, then kicked straight to a recording I knew too well. "We're sorry. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." Same flat voice, same hopeless tone, same gut punch. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. I did that 4 more times, like an idiot, because when your world has already flipped upside down, you start bargaining with dial tones. On the 5th try, I set the phone down before it could even finish the sentence. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming down the hall. I sat there on the edge of the bed, shaking, staring at that little line in my call log. To 19 a.m., Lily, -7 56 seconds. It was right there in black and white, like any other call. No special effects, no haunted label, just my dead daughter, slotted neatly between a reminder from my pharmacy and a spam call about my car's extended warranty. For a wild second, I thought, maybe this is some grief episode they talk about on TV. Maybe my brain finally snapped and started playing tricks on me after all these years. But my phone disagreed. It had a timestamp and a duration and a perfect little green arrow. And in my chest, beneath the fear, something else flickered that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope exactly. Hope felt too bright for this. More like a stubborn itch that said, what if? I didn't bother going back to sleep. I knew better. I sat in my recliner in the living room, wrapped in the old quilt Lily's grandmother made, watching the sky outside the window shift from black to purple to gray. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, half expecting the call log to vanish, for the whole thing to be gone like a dream. But it stayed to 19 a.m. Lily, when the clock on the stove crawled past 6 o'clock, I made coffee with hands that still trembled and grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door. My son Woodvay had a fit if he knew I was about to drive 3 hours on barely any sleep. But I wasn't about to call and explain. "Hey, your dead sister phoned last night. I'm gonna go hunt her down now." No way he'd believe me, and if he did, he'd try to stop me. This felt like something I had to do alone, the way I'd done everything the night. Lily signing papers, confirming her identity, picking out the coffin because my husband couldn't stop shaking. Back then, I didn't get a choice. Now, I was taking one. Before I walked out, though, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went to my bedroom closet, pushed past my Sunday dresses, and pulled out the shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were all the things I didn't let myself look at unless I was in the mood to cry. The funeral program, the death certificate, that last Polaroid from her birthday, and a folded piece of paper with the address of the cemetery plot. I opened the box, stared at the paperwork, then placed my phone on top for a second like I was connecting the two worlds. The one where she was gone, and the one where she called me in the middle of the night, asking where she was. If this is some kind of messed up sign, I muttered to nobody, you picked the wrong old lady to spook. Then I grabbed my purse, tucked the phone in the front pocket, and headed for the door. I didn't go to the cemetery first. That would come later, after I saw whatever waited for me on East Maple in Harrington. Oh, hey, one empty condemned building, some cruel prank, or something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about death, time, and what it means to lose a child. All I knew for sure as I eased my old Buick onto the highway was this. For the first time in 25 years, I had a direction that wasn't just from my house to a grave and back again. My daughter had called me. My daughter had sounded scared, and I was a mother long before I was an old woman. So whether she was a voice, a glitch, or something I didn't have a name for yet. I was going to find her. The morning air was thick with fog, the kind that makes everything look like it's hiding something. I hadn't driven that far alone in years, not since my husband passed. My son used to joke that if I went farther than the grocery store, I needed a map and a prayer. Well, I had both. The highway stretched out like an old scar, quiet and endless. I kept my phone on the passenger seat, volume up, waiting for it to ring again. Every time I passed a mile marker, I whispered the number to myself, like counting down to something I couldn't name. My mind kept looping the same question. What if she really is alive? The logical part of me said impossible. The mother part of me didn't care. Logic never wins against love. Not when it's your child. About an hour into the drive, I pulled into a gas station. The kind that looks like it has been stuck in 1993. Flickering neon sign. Coffee that smells like burnt tires. And a cashier who looked half asleep. "Morning, ma'am," he said as I poured myself a cup of sludge and tried to keep my hands steady. "Morning," I said. "You know where Harrington is?" He squinted, tapping a map behind him. "About 2 hours that way." "You visiting family?" I almost laughed. Something like that. As I got back in the car, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Gray hair, lines carved deep from years of worry, eyes that looked older than the rest of me. For a second, I saw a stranger. Then I blinked, and it was just me again. The fog lifted around the time I saw the first sign for Riverview Arms Apartments. My stomach nodded. It was real. The same name Lily had said on the phone. I turned down East Maple and slowed when the buildings came into view. It wasn't a fancy place. Chipped paint, rusted mailboxes, and a playground that looked like it hadn't heard laughter in years. The kind of complex you forget exists. Apartment 8A was on the second floor. Just like she'd said, I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a long time, gripping the handrail like I needed permission to go up. My knees were shaking, and not just from age. "You came this far," I told myself. "You don't turn around now." The hallway was dim, smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes, just like she'd described. When I reached the door, marked 8A, my heart stopped. There were fresh fingerprints on the knob. I stood there for a full minute, frozen. Then I knocked. Once. Twice. "Lily, no more answer." I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. I tried the handle. It clicked open. The air inside was cold and still. The blinds were half closed, and the only sound was the faint hum of an old fridge. There were signs someone had been there. A mug on the counter, a phone charger dangling from the wall, and a half-eaten apple turning brown on the table. Then I saw it on the floor near the couch, an envelope with my name on it. I dropped to my knees, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tear it open. Inside was a single note written in handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm close, but I'm not here yet. Don't trust what you see. Keep looking." My knees gave out, and I sat there on the floor, staring at the note. What did she mean, not here yet? Was she alive and hiding, or was I chasing something that wasn't really her? A ghost, a message from somewhere in between. Then I heard a soft creak from the hallway. Footsteps. I turned toward the door just in time to see a shadow slip past the frosted glass. Someone was out there. Someone watching. I didn't move when I saw it, not at first. I just sat there on that worn-out carpet with the note in my hands and my heart beating loud enough. I was sure whoever was in the hallway could hear it too. And for a second, it felt like those first few months after the funeral all over again, when every creak of the house sounded like someone coming home who never would. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not exactly. I hauled myself up using the arm of the couch, every joint complaining, and walked to the door like I belonged there, because if there's one thing you learn getting old, it's that. Half the battle is pretending you know what you're doing. I opened it fast, hoping to catch whoever it was off guard. The hallway looked empty at first glance. Just the faded runner rug and the cheap overhead light buzzing softly, flickering like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to work today. Then I saw him at the far end by the stairs, a man maybe mid-50s in a janitor's uniform, with a ring of keys hanging off his belt, pausing just a little too long as he turned the corner like he'd been standing there watching and hadn't expected me to open the door that fast. Our eyes met for a second, his dark, assessing, mine probably wild and too brightened. I felt that prickle in my spine that says, this person knows something you don't. "Excuse me," I called, my voice higher than usual, trying to sound casual like I was just another tenant asking where the trash chute was. "Do you work here?" He hesitated, then walked back toward me with a slow, measured gait, one hand resting on his keys like they were some kind of weapon. "Depends who's asking," he said, with that slightly suspicious tone people get when they see an unfamiliar car in their driveway. "You lost, ma'am." The word ma'am always rubs a little, even at my age. I straightened my shoulders. "Name's Evelyn," I said. "I'm looking for someone who might be staying in this unit." "8. His eyes flicked past me into the room, taking in the open door, the mug, the apple, the note still trembling between my fingers. Something changed in his face, then a twitch at the corner of his mouth, a tightening around the eyes, like he'd just seen a ghost, but didn't he want to say so. "Nobody's staying there," he replied, too quickly. "Not on the lease, anyway. That unit's supposed to be empty. You got the wrong place." I held up the envelope with my name on it, my hand steadier now that the anger was starting to simmer under the fear. "Empty apartments don't write letters," I said, "and they sure as hell don't leave them addressed to me." I watched his throat bob as he swallowed. For a second, I thought he might lie again, tell me some nonsense about kids breaking in, but he surprised me by sighing and dropping his shoulders, like a man setting down a heavy load. "Look," he said, dropping his voice, glancing up and down the hallway to make sure we were alone. "You're not the first person to come poking around this unit lately. Couple months back there was this girl, maybe 19, 20, kept showing up, asking for a woman who didn't live here no more. Said she had the wrong address, but she kept coming back anyway, like she couldn't quite believe it. Spent a lot of time sitting right there in that doorway, staring at the walls like they owed her an apology. Looked familiar, too. Couldn't place it at the time." My fingers tightened on the note. "What did she look like?" He shrugged. "Dark hair, up in one of them messy buns, purple streak in it. Big brown eyes. Wore this old denim jacket even when it was too hot for it. Kinda had that look lost, but pretending she wasn't. Why, that your granddaughter or something." The description hit me like a physical blow. He didn't know it, but he'd just described my daughter at 19, right down to the ridiculous purple streak she'd put in her hair to annoy Mom and shock the church ladies, as she put it, and that old denim jacket she refused to throw away even when the elbows went white and thin. I could see teenage Lily so clearly in my mind. Her leaning against my fridge, coffee mug in hand, smirking at some joke I didn't get tanned for a second. The hallway blurred. "Not my granddaughter," I sighed, slowly forcing my voice to stay even. "My daughter. But she died 25 years ago." The man's face did something complicated then, like he was trying to rearrange his features to match different versions of reality. "Well," he said after a beat, rubbing the back of his neck, Then either I've been seeing things, or your dead daughter has a twin walking around Harrington. I stepped out into the hallway, closer to him than he seemed comfortable with. Did she give you a name? He hesitated. Said folks called her L.A. Thought it was some Hollywood nonsense. But I don't know. She paid cash, never caused trouble, except hanging around this unit. I figured as long as she wasn't dealing dope or smashing windows, it wasn't my business. Place gets its share of runaways, and folks with nowhere else to go. I try not to make it worse. L.A. Lillian. My knees wanted to give out again, but I locked them and made myself stand taller. There are moments in your life when you can feel something tilting, like a picture frame knocked just off center, and this was one of them. Either this was a cruel coincidence, or something was tying my dead daughter to this broken-down building, and this scared, invisible girl the janitor had watched haunt the hallway. If she comes back, I said, staring him down the way I used to stare down my son when he tried to lie about sneaking out, you call me. Don't ask questions. Don't tell her I'm looking. Just call this number and keep an eye on her until I get here. I grabbed the pen from the note and scrawled my cell number on the back of a takeout menu sitting on the entry table. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have changed his mind. He took the paper and folded it into his breast pocket. You some kind of social worker? He asked. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No. Just a mother who's been through this rodeo before. He nodded, like he understood more than he was saying. I'm Miguel, he offered, sticking out a hand. His palm was calloused, warm, real. Been looking after this building 15 years. I see her again. I'll call. I shook his hand. Thank you, Miguel, I said, and meant it more than he probably realized. When he left, I went back inside 8A and shut the door behind me, leaning against it for a second to catch my breath. The apartment was quiet in that particular way. Vacant places are, where even the air feels like it's waiting for someone to claim it. I walked slowly around the room, touching things like they might vanish if I wasn't gentle. My fingers brushing the chipped mug on the counter, the apple now browning at the edges, a thrift store lamp with a crooked shade. There were no photographs, no clothes strewn on chairs, nothing that screamed, somebody lives here, yet just those small signs of an almost life. A phone charger, a pack of gum, a crumpled bus ticket on the floor with yesterday's date. My chest tightened. Whoever this girl was, she'd been here very recently, maybe even this morning. Maybe she'd heard me knock and slipped out the back, scared off by the sound of an old woman calling her dead daughter's name. Problems like this used to be my husband's territory. He had that steady, practical way about him that calmed people down, made them want to confess things before he even accused them of anything. I was the emotional one, the one who cried at commercials and took every slight to heart. But he'd been gone 10 years now, and the job of steady adult in the room had defaulted to me whether I liked it or not. So I did what he would have done. I looked for information. There was no mail with a name beyond the one envelope to me, no ID lying around, nothing with letters big enough for my old eyes to read from a distance. I knelt next to the coffee table with a grunt and pulled out the drawer. Inside was a fast food napkin with a phone number scribbled on it and one word: Mom. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Some girl out there, calling herself L.A., hanging around this apartment like it was a magnet, had a mom in her contacts too. Somewhere, another woman my age might be sitting by her own phone, wondering why her daughter hadn't called in 3 days. I pulled out my own phone and set the napkin next to it. The two numbers side by side like some kind of equation I didn't know how to solve. On the one hand, my dead daughter's number, disconnected but still in my contacts, like a ghost you pay a bill for. On the other, a stranger's mom, handwritten on a napkin. My thumb hovered over the unknown number. For a second, I imagined what that conversation would sound like. "Hi, you don't know me, but your daughter might be wearing my dead kitty's face and calling herself by her initials while haunting an abandoned apartment 3 hours from home. Mind if we talk?" I slipped the napkin into my purse instead. Not yet. I wasn't ready to drag someone else's mother into my storm. Not until I knew whether the lightning was real or just in my head. Sitting there on the floor, I unfolded Lily's note again and really read it. Not just the shock of seeing her handwriting, the loops of her L, the way she made her M's with that extra flourish, the heart she used to dot the I when she was feeling sentimental. If you're reading this, it means I'm close, but I'm not here yet. Don't trust what you see. Keep looking. L on the phone. She'd sounded scared and confused, like someone dropped into a story midway through and told to figure out the plot with no script. Here, on paper, she sounded more composed, like she knew she was sending me on a scavenger hunt and wanted me to stick with it. That contradiction gnawed at me. If I let myself believe this was really her, then we were dealing with something bigger than a runaway girl with a coincidence for a nickname. If I decided it was her couldn't be her, then I had to accept that some stranger was messing with an old woman's grief, and I wasn't sure which option made me angrier. I stayed in that apartment longer than I should have. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift across the stained carpet in my stomach to start complaining about the coffee-only breakfast. Finally, my knees had had enough, and I eased myself up with a series of unattractive grunts only the walls heard. On my way out, I paused at the door and looked back one last time, memorizing the shape of the room, the way the light hit the cabinet handles, the exact angle of the crooked lamp. I had the sense that I'd be back, and I didn't like it, but I knew it in my bones, same way I knew when a storm was coming before the forecast said so. Downstairs, Miguel was sweeping the lobby, his broom scraping rhythmically over the tile. He stopped when he saw me. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I found enough to know I'm not done." He nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. "You want my advice," he said, leaning on the broom. "Leave it alone. Kids like that, they got a way of pulling you into their mess. You look like you've had enough mess for one lifetime." That almost made me laugh. "You're not wrong," I said, but I already picked up the phone when it rang. Too late to hang up now. He watched me a second, like he was trying to decide if I was brave or just stubborn. "Well," he said finally, glancing toward the street, "if you're gonna stick your hand in the beehive, at least know this. She wasn't the only one asking about that unit. Few weeks back, there was a man here too, older than her, younger than you. Said he was looking for a girl who'd run off. Showed me a picture on his phone. Looked a lot like the one I saw in the hallway. He got real quiet when I told him I'd seen her. A flicker of unease crawled up my spine. Did he say who he was?" "Said he was family," Miguel replied. "Didn't look like her, though something about his eyes was different. He left a card in case she showed up again." He dug in his pocket and handed me a slightly crumpled business card. On it was a name marked Taylor, private investigator, and a number. My first instinct was irritation. Where had this man been when my Lily disappeared into a morgue 25 years ago? Where were all these people when I was begging for help back then? When I was screaming at doctors and police officers and God himself to give her back? Now, suddenly, strange men in janitors and half-haunted apartments were lining up with clues like some Latin life puzzle I hadn't asked to solve. Still, a pie meant someone else had a stake in this girl Visala. And maybe, just maybe, his interest wasn't entirely separate from mine. "You mind if I keep this?" I asked. "Be my guest," Miguel said. "The less folks like that come sniffing around here, the better I sleep." I tucked the card into my purse next to the napkin and Lily's note. my bag suddenly feeling heavier than it had any right to. As I stepped out into the weak afternoon sun, I had the urge to look up, and when I did, I saw the curtains in 8A twitch, just a fraction. It could have been the breeze. It could have been my imagination. Or it could have been a girl with a purple streak in her hair, watching the old lady who refused to stop looking. Either way, I raised my chin and got into my car. Grief had taken everything from me once, because I'd had no choice. This time, if I was going to lose sleep and peace and whatever was left of my sanity, it would be on my terms. Somewhere between this crumbling apartment in Harrington and the house where I kept my dead daughter's number on speed dial, there was an answer. And if I had to drag it into the light, one stubborn step at a time, well, motherhood had always been a long-distance job. By the time I got home that evening, the highway lights had started to blur into gold streaks on my windshield. My body was tired, but my mind was still going, turning over every detail like a stone I couldn't put down. Miguel's words, the note in Lily's handwriting, the name Mark Taylor on that business card, they looped around and around until the lines between what I'd lived and what I'd imagined started to blur. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and dust. I left my purse on the kitchen table, sat down, and spread out the day's evidence like a detective in a movie. The note, the napkin, the card. The quiet was so thick, it almost hummed. I kept waiting for the phone to ring again, but it didn't. When I finally dialed the number from the business card, my hands were steadier than I expected. It rang twice before a man answered, his voice smooth, professional, maybe late 40s. Taylor Investigations. Mr. Taylor, I said, my name's Evelyn Carter. You left your card at Riverview Arms. A pause, then, guarded. Who gave it to you? The maintenance man. Miguel said you were looking for a girl named Ale. The silence on the line stretched long enough for me to hear my own pulse. You're not the police, are you? He asked finally. No, I said. Just a mother who's looking for answers. Another beat of quiet. Then he exhaled. All right, Mrs. Carter. Maybe we should talk in person. Tomorrow morning. Coffee shop on Main, Harrington, 9 a.m. I'll be the guy who looks like he hasn't slept in a week. Before I could answer, he hung up. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that apartment door, that flicker of movement in the window, and the thought that maybe, just maybe, my daughter was alive somewhere but couldn't find her way home. I'd prayed for second chances before, but this one felt dangerous, like the universe was offering me a gift with a knife under the ribbon. At 8:55 the next morning, I walked into the cafe. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like burnt beans and nostalgia. A man in a wrinkled gray jacket sat near the back, a stack of papers beside his laptop. He looked exactly like he said he would. Tired, guarded, but sharp. Mrs. Carter? He asked when I approached. That's me. He motioned to the seat across from him. You found my card. That means you found the building. I nodded. And something else. A note in my daughter's handwriting. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. Tell me about your daughter. So I did. The crash, the funeral, the grave under the maple tree, the phone call at 2:19 a.m. I talked until my throat went dry, and when I finally stopped, he didn't look skeptical, just thoughtful. I've been tracking a woman who goes by LA, he said slowly. She uses cash, doesn't stay anywhere long, and she's been spotted around Riverview Arms for months. She avoids cameras, doesn't leave digital footprints. The odd part is the first time someone reported her, They described her as looking exactly like a girl named Lily Ann Carter, who died in 1999. My chest tightened. "That's my daughter." He nodded. "Yeah." I ran facial comparison software, old yearbook photo of Lily versus a grainy security shot of LA, outside a bus terminal last year. 92% match. That's not coincidence. I gripped the edge of the table. "You think she's alive?" "I think someone wants you to believe she is." He leaned forward. "People fake deaths. People fake identities. 25 years is a long time. Maybe she didn't die. Maybe somebody made sure you thought she did." The words hit harder than I expected. The body. It was confirmed. Confirmed how? I hesitated. "Dental records." "Police said it was definitive." "Police can be wrong," he said quietly, "or paid to be." The idea sounded absurd, and yet, sitting there with the hum of the espresso machine behind us, it didn't feel impossible. He slid a photo across the table. A blurry image from a security camera. A woman leaving a grocery store at night, hood up, but her face angled just enough toward the lens that I could see her eyes. I'd have known them anywhere. I touched the picture like it might vanish. "Where was this?" "Harrington," he said, 2 weeks ago." By the time I left the cafe, my hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time, but from the rush of having something solid to hold on to. Proof that I wasn't chasing ghosts. On the drive home, I called my son first time in a while. "Hey, Mom," he said, distracted. "Everything okay?" "I need to ask you something strange," I said. "Do you remember the night of your sister's accident?" He sighed softly. "Mom, please, we've been through this. Just answer me," I said, firmer than I meant. "You never saw the body, right?" "No. You and Dad handled it." "And the police? They didn't let us view the remains. Said it was too damaged." He paused. "Yeah. You said you identified her from the pendant she wore." That pendant, the tiny silver locket shaped like a heart engraved with LAC. It was the only thing they gave back to me from the crash site, charred around the edges. I still kept it in the top drawer of my dresser. After we hung up, I drove straight home, opened that drawer, and held the locket under the lamp. For the first time, I noticed something I'd somehow missed. The hinge wasn't completely sealed, like someone had replaced it. Inside, instead of the picture of Lily as a child, there was a strip of paper folded so thin it could have been hidden for years. I unfolded it carefully. 3 words, written in tiny, rushed handwriting. "Trust the driver." My breath caught. The driver. My breath caught. The driver. The man in the other car had died on impact. Or so the report said. But now that phrase, "trust the driver," sounded less like a memory and more like a clue. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Mark Taylor's photos. If that woman in the picture really was my daughter, then somebody had spent 25 years hiding her or protecting her. I sat by the window, looking at the dark street outside, the world quiet except for the occasional car rolling past. Then my phone buzzed. A text, no name, just a number I didn't recognize. "Don't trust him. He lied about everything. If you want the truth, go back to the place where she learned to drive." I stared at the message until it faded from the screen. I typed back, "Who is this?" But it came up, message failed to send. The only place that fit the clue was the old country road where Lily had practiced driving with her father, out near the Carter farm that had long since been sold off. I didn't even wait until morning. I threw on a coat, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The road hadn't changed much. The wooden fence still leaned at the same tired angle. At the curve, Where the trees opened up, there was a small storage shed that used to belong to our neighbor. A new lock hung on the door. Inside the glove box, I found my husband's old toolbox key. A random guess, and, unbelievably, it fit. The padlock clicked open, and the door creaked. The smell of dust and old oil hit me first. Then, my flashlight landed on something that made my knees go weak. Stacks of folders, each labeled Taylor Investigations Client Carter. I pulled one open. Inside were photographs. Some of me, some of Lily, some of our house taken from a distance. In one photo, dated just 6 months ago, I was gardening in my backyard. My pulse thudded in my ears. Mark Taylor hadn't just found me by accident. He'd been watching me long before we met, and in the corner of the shed, taped to the wall, was another note. If you want your daughter back, stop asking him questions. I stepped outside, heart hammering, the night air sharp in my lungs. Somewhere between the grief and the hope, anger started to rise. The kind that burns steady and clear. Whoever had dragged me back into this wasn't finished. But neither was I. I probably should have gone home, slept on it, talked to a lawyer, done something sensible. But you don't get to pick the timing when your past comes knocking. So I got back in my car, hands still shaking on the wheel. And right there in the middle of that old farm road under a sky with no streetlights, I dialed Mark Taylor's number. He picked up on the second ring, sounding groggy and irritated, like maybe he'd actually tried to take my advice and get some sleep. Mrs. Carter, it's late, he said. Why don't we schedule something for tomorrow? I can. Cut it out, I snapped, louder than I intended, my own voice startling me in the confined space of the car. I found your little hideout. Riverview Arms wasn't the only place you left. Things lying around. I am sitting here looking at files labeled Client Carter in a shed on the old Miller property off County Road 6. Ring any bells? The silence on the line told me all I needed to know. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of somebody mentally flipping through backup plans. Where are you exactly? He asked finally. His voice flattered now. Drop a pin? I'll come to you. Yeah, I don't think so, I said. You've been following me for months, maybe years. Had cameras on my house, pictures of my yard, and you didn't think that was worth mentioning when we had coffee. You left files out here like I was some assignment you could walk away from. You want to talk. We do it where I can walk out if I don't like the answers. I rattled off the name of a diner, just off the highway. A place I knew well enough that the waitresses still called me hun, even though I hadn't been there in a while. 15 minutes, I said. You're late? I'm gone. I hung up before he could argue, tossed the phone on the passenger seat, and headed for the diner in a blur of old muscle memory and fresh adrenaline. The neon sign out front buzzed faintly. Half the letters burned out, so it just read D.A., which felt appropriate somehow. Life rarely gives you the full word. Inside, the usual third-shift crowd was thin. A trucker nursing his coffee in the corner. A young couple shedding fries like they hadn't figured out life kicks you yet. And Carla, the night waitress, who gave me a double take and then a smile. Well, I'll be, she said, as she poured my coffee without asking. Haven't seen you in a minute, Miss Carter. Couldn't sleep? Something like that, I said, wrapping my hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. I took a booth where I could see the parking lot and watched the entrance like a hawk, feeling that old familiar mixture of dread and curiosity churn in my gut. When Mark walked in, exactly 16 minutes later, close enough that I knew he'd come straight from wherever he was. He looked different than he had at the cafe. Less polished, more frayed around the edges, like the mask had slipped a little. His jacket was thrown on over a t-shirt, and his hair was damp like he'd splashed water on his face on the way. He slid into the booth across from me without waiting to be invited, glanced once at the man in the corner, once at the couple, and then fixed his eyes on me. "You move fast for someone your age," he said, trying to make it a joke. But there was a tightness around his mouth that betrayed him. "Yeah, well, grief made me slow for a long time," I shot back. "Guess I'm done letting it." I reached into my bag and dropped one of the folders on the table, flipping it open so he could see the contents. Photos of me at the grocery store, me at the mailbox, me kneeling by Lily's grave, timestamps in the corner notes, scribbled in the margins. One page even had a little line that read, "Subject appears to maintain ritual visits. Emotional distress stable." I tapped that with my fingernail. "You made my life sound like a weather report," I said. "Who hired you, Mark?" He stared at the folder for a long second, and I watched the calculation in his eyes, the moment he decided whether to lie again or cut his losses. "Your husband," he said finally. For a moment the diner's hum faded, like someone turned the volume down on the world. "My husband's been dead for 10 years, I said, each word careful. "You want to try that answer again?" "Before he died," Mark clarified quickly, leaning forward. "He hired me before he passed. Look, Evelyn. Can I call you Evelyn? There is a lot you don't know about what happened the night of that crash." My heart did a little stutter at the sound of my first name from his mouth, but I nodded stiffly. "Start talking." He took a breath, glanced up at Carla as she topped off her coffee, waited until Shide walked away, then dropped his voice. "Your husband, Daniel, came to me 25 years ago, a week after Lily's accident. My firm was smaller back then. We handled insurance fraud, missing persons, the occasional custody dispute. He said the police were hiding something, that the story they'd told you about the crash didn't add up. He'd gotten a call from a number he didn't recognize the night before the funeral. A man who claimed your daughter was alive." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Why didn't he tell me that? Mark gave me a look that was almost pitying, because he wasn't sure he believed it. "And he didn't want to pull you back from the edge if it turned out to be a sick joke. So he hired me quietly. Asked me to look into the other driver, the paramedics on scene, the paperwork, arrangements for the body. Said if there was even a 1% chance she'd survive somehow, he'd do anything to find her." I gripped my mug so hard, my knuckles ached. This version of my husband, frantic, desperate, making moves I never knew about, matched the exhausted man who sat at the kitchen table staring into his coffee for months after the funeral. But at the same time, it made a horrible kind of sense. He'd always thought he could fix things if he just worked harder, stayed later, talked to the right people. "So what did you find?" I asked. "Not enough," Mark said, and the frustration in his voice didn't sound fake. "The official records were locked up tight, but there were weird gaps in the chain. The ambulance transporting your daughter's body made an unscheduled stop on the way to the hospital. Took a 7-minute detour through an industrial park for traffic reasons. Even though it was 2 a.m., the driver of the other car had sealed juvenile records we couldn't access, and the coroner who signed the report." He shook his head. "Retired 2 weeks later, moved across the country. No forwarding info. Every time I tried to tug on a thread, it disappeared in my hand." "So you gave up," I said bitterly. "Took your retainer and moved on." He met my gaze. "No, your husband did." After 6 months of hitting walls, he told me to stop. Said it was killing him. Said maybe some things were better left buried. He paid me out, told me never to contact you about it, and that was that. I kept the files because I don't like leaving puzzles unsolved. And then, last year, I got a call from an unknown number with a voice modulator offering me $10,000 to track a girl who went by the initials LA, They sent a photo. It was like looking at your daughter all over again. I thought of the note in my locket, the one someone had to have swapped in without my knowledge. And you didn't think to tell me any of this when we met? I didn't know how much you could handle, he said quietly. You looked fragile. That stung. Fragile is not the word I'd use. I snapped. You've been watching me cry at a headstone for how long? Taking notes? You don't get to decide what I can handle. He held up his hands. You're right. I messed that up. But I didn't put that note in your necklace. And I didn't write those messages you got. Someone else is moving pieces here. And they wanted you looking my way. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because as much as I wanted to lay every piece of this at his feet, he was right about that part. The text about where she learned to drive. The note taped in the shed telling me not to trust him. Someone was narrating this, nudging me from clue to clue, and the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a game Lily would have mocked when she was alive. Look, Mom, it is like one of those mystery shows where the main character is the last to know. Who's the driver? I asked suddenly, the phrase from the locket burning in my mind. The one I'm supposed to trust. Mark frowned. The only driver in the official story is the guy in the other car. Name was Derek Harper. 20. Minor record for dumb teenage stuff. Supposedly drunk that night. Died at the scene. But I never liked that file. Why? Because kids like that don't usually get their records sealed that early. Unless they did something that embarrassed somebody important. He said, and because the toxicology report was signed off by the same coroner who disappeared. It all smelled wrong. So, what are you saying? I asked. That he wasn't drunk. I'm saying somebody needed him to look like the villain, Mark said. And somebody needed your daughter to look dead. Carla came by then, dropping off a plate of pancakes I didn't remember ordering. You okay, Hoon? She asked softly, probably seeing my face had gone pale. You want me to call somebody? I'm fine, I lied. Just old memories. She gave my shoulder a squeeze and walked away, leaving us in our little bubble of quiet chaos. All right, I said after a moment. Say, I believe you. Say my husband hired you back then, and he got scared and backed off. Say someone else hired you now to find this LA girl. Where does that leave us? With more questions than answers. Mark sighed. But at least we're asking them in the same place now. I thought about the warning text. Don't trust him. About the note in the shed. If you want your daughter back, stop asking him questions. If whoever wrote those wanted me to drop Mark, they didn't know me very well. The fastest way to make me hold on to something is to tell me to let it go. I found another note, I said slowly. In my house, hidden in a locket I've had for 25 years. It said, trust the driver. If Derek wasn't the villain, maybe he wasn't the one I was meant to fear. Mark's eyes sharpened. You still have the necklace at home. Don't lose it, he said. If someone swapped that note in after the crash, they either had access to your things back then or access to your house now. Either way, that narrows the list. Narrows it to who? I asked. Family? Cops? You. He winced like I'd slapped him. Fair. I deserve that. But for what it's worth, I never went inside your house. The surveillance was done from the street. Whoever got their hands on that locket would have needed more than a zoom lens. My stomach twisted. The idea of some stranger in my bedroom, rifling through my jewelry while I slept down the hall, made my skin crawl. Why would anybody do that? I whispered. Why leave breadcrumbs now, after all this time? Mark shrugged. But it wasn't careless. It was the shrug of someone who played this game before and knows how ugly it can get. Guilt, revenge, leverage. People reach out when they're cornered, or when they can't carry a secret anymore. I thought about the driver again, about some 20-year-old kid painted as a drunk villain in a story that might have never been his. Maybe he'd had parents too, sitting by a window waiting for a call that never came. I want his file, I said. All of it, not the redacted version. The real one. I can try, Mark said. But, no buts, I cut in. You brought me into this. Now, whether you meant to or not, I'm done being the person everybody protects by keeping in the dark. If my daughter's alive out there, or if she died in some way I was never told about, I want the truth, all of it, even if it hurts. He held my gaze for a long time, and then something in his face softened, like he'd finally accepted I was going to break the way he'd assumed. Okay, he said. I'll dig, but you need to promise me something too. I raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to ask for favors, son. That got the faintest hint of a smile from him. Fair. Still gonna ask. Don't go wandering into sheds alone again. Don't meet strange girls in abandoned apartments without telling someone where you are. Whoever is orchestrating this knows how to push your buttons. They're using your love for your daughter to move you around. That makes you vulnerable. I bristled, but beneath the irritation was the uncomfortable recognition that he was right. I survived losing her once, I said. I'm not afraid of much else. Yeah, he said quietly. That's exactly what worries me. We left it there for the night, with promises to be in touch and a stack of files heavier than they looked. When I got home, the house felt different again. Not haunted, not exactly, but crowded somehow. Like all the old versions of myself were standing around watching present-day me walk through the motions. The mother who'd believed the official story, the widow who packed away her husband's things and never found that business card or those notes. The woman who kept her daughter's number in her phone, like a candle that never quite went out. Upstairs, in my bedroom, I opened the top drawer and pulled out the locket again, running my thumb over the engraved initials. L.A.C. Lillian Carter. L.A. the girl haunting the hallways of Riverview Arms. The girl Miguel had seen sitting outside looking lost. The girl in the grainy grocery store photo, my daughter, or someone wearing her face. I set the locket on the nightstand next to my phone and sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion settling into my bones now that the adrenaline was ebbing. For the first time since the call at 2:19 a.m., I felt something like clarity. No matter how many lies had been told, no matter who had hidden what, I had two things I hadn't had in 25 years: movement and direction. The past wasn't a seal too many more. It was a door cracked open, with light leaking through. I laid down without changing, one hand resting on the locket, like it was some kind of anchor. And somewhere between replaying Mark's words and planning what I'd say to him, if he lied to me again, I drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Not the marimba ringtone, this time just a soft chime for a text. I fumbled for my glasses and squinted at the screen. Unknown number, again. One line. Stop digging, Mom. You're closer than you think, and that makes you a target. My heart slammed against my ribs. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then typed the same word it always seemed to in these moments. Lily. The message hung in the bubble for a second, then popped up with the same mocking error as before. Message failed to send. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, feeling that familiar ache behind my eyes. Nice try, I muttered into the dark, not sure if I was talking to whoever sent the text or to my own fear. You had 25 years to scare me off. You're late. I set the phone back down, fingers brushing the locket, and made myself a quiet promise that echoed louder than anything I'd said out loud all day. Whoever was pulling these strings, whether it was my husband's old choices, some stranger with a guilty conscience, or my own daughter trying to keep me out of something I wasn't done. Not until I had the full story from someone who'd been there when the car crashed, when the ambulance took that 7-minute detour, when a death certificate was signed for a girl who might be, never made it to the morgue. Trust the driver. The note had said. Fine, I'd start there, and if that meant dragging every old record, every forgotten file, every scared witness into the daylight, then that's what I'd do. I may have been an old woman in a small house with a tired heart, but I was still a mother, and mothers, no matter how many years pass, don't let go of their kids without a fight. By the time morning light crept through my curtains, I hadn't slept a minute. Mark's words, Miguel's worried face, that one line on my call history to 19 a.m. Lily, kept looping in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. At 9:30, my phone rung. Not Lily this time. Mark, you better have something worth dragging me through another day of this, I said. I got a name, he replied. The driver. Derek Harper. And a place, his mom's house. You up for a trip? At this point, I said, all I've got is time. We drove out to Briar Creek, one of those tired little towns that look like they gave up on being noticed years ago. Derek's mother, Linda, opened the door before we even knocked twice. Her eyes went straight to the chain at my neck, then to my face. You're late, she said. But I guess late is better than never. Come in. Her kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. The walls were lined with family photos, kids, grandkids, and one boy with a crooked smile, and Derek Harper senior year, printed at the bottom. That's my son, she said, the one they turned into the villain in your grief story. She didn't waste time. No, he wasn't drunk that night, she said. No, he didn't lose control. He was working for the wrong people, driving for a man in a tan jacket who moved folks that needed to disappear. Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not. My stomach twisted. What does that have to do with my daughter? Everything, she said. Your girl heard something she wasn't supposed to at that diner. Names, money, the kind of thing people don't forgive. Derek was told to scare her. Little tap at a light, a near miss. Instead, the rain, the timing, another car, it all went bad. They both should have died, but they didn't. Not right away. She looked me straight in the eye. The first ambulance that showed up. She said, not everyone on it was there to save lives. That handler in the tan jacket rode in the back with your daughter. They took a 7-minute detour to a private clinic out past the industrial park. Off the books, no sign, no questions. My heart pounded in my throat. And my husband, he got a call, she said quietly, from someone who told him your girl had seen too much, that certain people would never stop coming after her. They offered him something ugly, dressed up as mercy. Fake her death, move her, give her a new name, closed casket, quick burial, no more questions. In return, he kept quiet and blamed my boy. I felt the room tilt. He never told me, I whispered. He was trying to keep you alive and her hidden, Linda said. Doesn't mean he was right. Just means he was desperate. And Derek, I forced out. Derek tried to blow it up, she said. Tried to follow the ambulance. Tried to report what he saw. So they folded him into the story too. One crash, two kids, one neat lie. Drunk boy kills innocent girl. Case closed. Grieving mothers on both sides. No one asks who signed the paperwork. Silence settled in, heavy and loud. Before they finished with him, she added, voice cracking just a little. They let him make one call. He told me, tell her mom the girl's alive. Tell her to trust the driver. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew if I talked, more people would disappear. So I kept my mouth shut and visited a grave I was in sure belonged to who they said it did. Just like you. My hand went to my locket. 3 tiny words pressed against my skin. Trust the driver. Somebody's texting her, Mark said, leaving notes. Pushing her toward the truth. Linda nodded once. People get tired of hiding, she said. Maybe your daughter's finally done being a ghost. The drive back to Riverview Arms felt shorter, like the road had been waiting for us to finally stop pretending. Miguel met us at the entrance. She's here, he said. Stairwell. Stairwell. Can't tell if she wants to run or stay. I didn't bother pretending I was calm. The stairwell smelled like old dust and cheap frying oil. On the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floor, a girl sat with her elbows on her knees, hood up, denim jacket worn thin at the seams. A faded streak of purple cut through her hair. Ella, Miguel said softly, got someone here for you. She didn't look up at first. I told you, I'm not staying long. Just needed somewhere I wasn't being watched to think. Then she raised her head. Same eyes. Same little freckle by the left one. Same stubborn jawline that used to clench whenever I said curfew. She froze. So did I. We stared at each other like the world had stopped and forgotten to start again. I know who she is, she said quietly, never taking her gaze off me. You didn't change that much, Mom. My knees almost buckled. Miguel and Mark both moved, like they were afraid I'd hit the floor. You remember me, I whispered. How could I not, she said. You're the only person I kept calling, even when they convinced me I'd made you up. I stepped closer, slow and careful. You called me from here, I said. Couple nights ago. Said nobody could see you. Her laugh was sharp and tired. Yeah. Turns out when the system decides you're way better off dead on paper, people learn not to look too hard. Easier that way. For them, why now? I asked. Why reach out after all this time? Because the man in the tan jacket is retiring, she said. He's slipping. Keeping me doped up stopped working. I started remembering things I wasn't supposed to. Maple tree. Closed casket. Your voice ripping into a cop like you were gonna burn the hospital down. I figured if I rattled the cage hard enough. Her eyes went soft. You'd still be the woman I remembered. That woman never left, I said. She just got wrinkles. A shaky smile twitched at her mouth. I held out my arms. Come here. She hesitated half a heartbeat, then stood and crossed the last few steps. When she hit my chest, it was like the air finally came back into my lungs after 25 years. She smelled like cheap coffee, rain, and something that was still undeniably her. I thought you'd hate me, she mumbled into my shoulder, for not finding a way back sooner. I was busy hating all the wrong people, I said. But I can fix that. She snorted a little wet laugh. Behind us, Mark cleared his throat. We can't stay long, he said, but we don't have to run either. Not this time. We build a record. We push it up the chain. We make enough noise that nobody can quietly bury this again. That old part of me that once screamed at uniforms outside an emergency room door showed its teeth. Let them try, I said. They had 25 years of my silence. They don't get the rest of my life too. Lily pulled back enough to look at me. Her eyes were red. But there was a spark there I hadn't seen since she was 19, and certain the world hadn't met a fight it could win against her. I'm scared, she admitted softly, of what comes next. Of them. Of all of it. Me too, I said. But you made the right call. Literally. She laughed. Guess I finally did. Later, after plans were made and safe places arranged, I dropped her at a small rental house out of town. A quiet start instead of another secret coffin. On the drive home, my chest felt heavy and light at the same time. In my kitchen, I sat at the table, opened my contacts, and scrolled to Lily. I didn't delete the old number. I just added the new one underneath and moved it to the top. Ghosts can sit quietly in the back. The living get front row. A text buzzed a minute later. A picture. Lily on a sagging couch, mug in hand, hair a mess, eyes still tired but so alive. Don't freak out. But yeah, it's me. Good night, Mom. I wiped my eyes and typed back. I buried you 25 years ago. You called late. I'm allowed to freak out a little. 3 dots. Then, fair. I leaned back in my chair and finally let the tears come. Not the hollow ones I'd cried at the cemetery for years, but something different. Raw. Grateful. Terrified. Real. The hole in my life was still there. It always would be. But now, there was something built over it. Not a perfect bridge. Not a neat ending. Just a stubborn, shaky path made of second chances, hard truths, and a daughter who refused to stay erased. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't walking alone. If this emotional story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves deep family dramas, and subscribe to Payback Files stories for more powerful tales of betrayal, secrets, and unexpected second chances. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if someone you thought was gone forever suddenly came back into your life? Your support helps this channel grow and lets us keep bringing you more stories like this one. Disclaimer: this is a fictional story created purely for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, names, places, or events is completely coincidental.